Hey, this is Katie Richardson, and you're listening to the Headsmack podcast.
You are listening to conversations with misfits, mavericks, and trailblazers.
Hey, welcome to the Headsmack podcast. This is Paul Pabolny. I am so excited to have Katie Richardson with me today, a misfit, but also on a mission to create powerful leaders. She's got a background in design. She's built a multi-million-dollar international company with distribution in 2,000 stores in the US and 26 countries. Her work has been featured on Ellen DeGeneres, The Today Show, Rachel Ray. She's also been featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine. Today, as an executive coach, Katie teaches founders and CEOs the mindset, skill sets, and tool sets that you need to operate powerfully in business and in life so that you can live with purpose and do what you were born to do. Katie, welcome.
Paul, it's so wonderful to be here. I'm super excited to be talking to you. I love conversations with misfits. Like, hello. Yeah.
Hello. We all feel like it sometimes.
Yeah.
And we sometimes feel alone. And we sometimes feel that means we're broken. And
totally.
When we feel like a misfit, but I believe that there's also power in being a misfit sometimes and not being part of the ordinary. Well, Katie, it is exciting to have you on, and I love what you do. I love the things that you talk about, and I want to hear a little bit about your origin story. Where did Katie start from?
I grew up in a family of 6 kids. When I was 3, my mom had twins. I was the 4th. And so I very quickly became the invisible child. And from a really young age, I just was really curious about the world. And I grew up in Phoenix, grew up barefoot and in my swimming suit most of the time, just running around, exploring the world, really curious about things. And creativity was a big part of my upbringing. But so was also test scores and intellectual intelligence. And my other siblings, they ranked really high, right? Valedictorians of the school. And I did fine. I was even in accelerated classes, AP classes, but I wasn't at the very top. And so growing up, I thought I was the dumb one,
Wow.
which is kind of sad as I look back and I think about it. And 2 years into college, I was starting to feel a little bit lost. And I had all of these passions and things that lit me up, but they weren't academic. And I started to notice that I was taking kind of the classes that I was supposed to take, but then I was also taking things like wood shop, lathing, metal foundry, welding. And it was just like, this was just kind of Katie's little hobby on the side until I discovered a program called industrial design, which is not what it sounds like. It's product design. You're not necessarily designing factories. You're designing products that then would get manufactured. Right. And so as soon as I found this program, I was at a university that had 30,000 students, but the program was admitting between 15 and 20 students a year into that specific program. So it was a really elite program. And I felt like I kind of finagled my way into there because I had been in university for 2 years, but hadn't necessarily been aiming at industrial design. And when I discovered it, they actually were really excited to meet me and, wanted me in the program because of my history. I had been studying furniture design and even fabrication. And I even had some art and figure drawing. So I actually had a lot of the skill sets that I would need to excel in this program. And Paul, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was good at something. Wow. And I ended up getting a scholarship from General Motors. I got national design awards, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, maybe I can be good at something. Because up until then, I felt, honestly, it's kind of sad to say, but I kind of felt like a good for nothing. So it was the first time in my life where I was like, wow, people want the thing that lights me up. And it was a really exciting, exhilarating moment for me in my life. So that's where I started.
Yeah. And so, it's kind of interesting in doing this podcast and the people that I'm talking to, and it's such a broad range of misfits and mavericks and ne'er-do-wells, and one of the things that I've found in these conversations is this discussion of the convergence of things that happen in your life that seem unrelated and you don't know what their purpose is. You don't feel that there is any purpose at all in it. You know, it's you did woodworking as a side thing in school,
Right.
and you also doodled and did figure drawing, and all of that stuff. And then when this convergence happens of finding the thing that all this works for, is an amazing moment, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what happened to
Yeah.
you through this.
Yeah, and some of the most sought after talented experts in their fields, they have kind of this Venn diagram of skill sets. And that's
Yeah.
what makes them so unique and special is they're able to pull from multiple perspectives, which gives this really unique vision. And, up until that point, I didn't see those things about myself. And I honestly was like really questioning myself. And there were many times in my life where I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do. And that moment of finding industrial design and starting to pursue that, I started to realize that following that list of supposed tos, I could just feel it in my body. I was like, I can't keep doing this. And I don't know where this other path leads, but I know that I'm dying inside if I just keep pursuing the things that I think I'm supposed to do. And so I didn't really realize it at the time. It might look like courage, but it really just was realizing that the path that I'm on is not sustainable for me. And so in a way, it didn't really even require a lot of courage. It was just like, I can't do that anymore. And so
Right.
I don't know what the right path is for me yet. I didn't, but I started to at least search and look, explore, and I was open to ideas.
Right. And that's part of it is taking those steps in an uncertain direction sometimes that then lets you know what you like and what you don't like. But without taking those bold steps forward, you kind of always in this place of wondering, like, what is that next thing for me? And so, after you graduated, after you found this, what was the next step? Did you enter into that space immediately? Like what happened next for you?
Well, in the process of all of that, not only did I find industrial design and start thriving as a student, but I also found a really incredible man. And so we got married my last year of school. And it was awesome, Paul, because he was also a product designer. And what's interesting is a lot of people would think, well, that's potentially competitive. And, how do you guys create alignment? And doesn't
Right.
it create tension in your marriage? And what's interesting is, yes, we both learned that skill set, but we're actually very, like, if you looked at our personalities, we're yin and yang. We're very opposites from each other. And so that actually became kind of the recipe for what ultimately became our first success. So we ended up together. We got married and we were working for competing design firms and started having kids. And one Christmas break, he said, this is great that we're giving all of our best ideas to other people. What if we designed a product that allowed him to quit his job? I was doing freelance and he was working full time. What if over Christmas break, we designed a product that would allow him to quit his job and we could build a company together? Neither one of us had ever done this before. We didn't have any sort of a business background, just design and design thinking. But it just lit me up inside to think that instead of him spending, 2.5 hours a day commuting to work and coming home frustrated and just feeling like he was giving his best ideas to other people, what if we brought both of our perspectives and our unique skill sets together and did do something exciting? So we did. Over that Christmas break, we sketched, we designed, we ideated, and we ultimately developed what became the Pudge tub. It's an infant bathtub that hangs and stores flat, and it folds into a little bucket seat that fits in your bathroom sink. If you've ever tried to bathe an infant, it's terrifying. They are squirmy and slippery, and they're scared and you're scared. And it was not a good experience for me as we were having kids. And so we ended up over that Christmas break designing the product that was solving our own problem. And so we designed this product, and I don't know which story you want, but first it failed and then it didn't.
Well, both of those stories, because I think that's a couple of things already with what you just said. First of all is you were solving a problem that you had and felt that others might have as well. And I think that's
Mhm.
that's such a powerful thing to examine your life. If you're looking for the next big idea, just look at some of the problems that you're wrestling with and look at, could other people be wrestling with the same problem? And if I've solved it, how do I then turn that into a product or turn that into a service that could also help others with that? And
Mhm.
so talk to me now. I do want to know about the story of you with your kids in the store. At what point did that
Mhm.
happen in your journey?
Yeah. So just to give you a frame of mind and a reference as to kind of what our reality looked like at that time. We were living on food storage. My husband was working full time. And then when he would come home, we would kind of work together as kids were climbing on us, right? And we had 2 young kids at the time. I was pregnant with our third. And I mean, I was grinding wheat to make 4 loaves of bread a week. We were eating rice and beans.
Mm,
And to talk about misfits and taking risks, it was too risky for us, both of us, to just live the life that everybody else was living, the 9 to 5, driving the minivan, getting a paycheck. Like, it just didn't align with our values. And so we made a decision to have him quit his job, and we were going to double down and do all of this. But you asked about the boutique. That actually happened right before. So I had been, as my kids were, taking naps or whatever, I had a 1962 Bernina sewing machine that had been my mother's.
well.
And I kind of made sure it ended up in my house. Because as a designer, as a fabricator, I need a tool. And I didn't
Yeah.
have a wood shop, but a sewing machine is also an incredible tool. And I needed a place to get kind of my ideas into reality. And that was the sewing machine. So as my kids were asleep, I would design and make things. And I was making baby shoes and hats and baby carriers and bags. And I did not think of myself as an entrepreneur. I didn't think of myself as somebody who was trying to make it in the world. I was just Katie in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was kind of my syndrome for many years. Just Katie, just a nobody, right? The invisible girl that I grew up feeling like. But as I was making this stuff, I would just get attacked as I was out and about. And keep in mind, we were living on food storage. My husband was making a small income, and we were trying to strategize what's our way out of this, the rat
Yeah.
race.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was putting 3 car seats in the back of my husband's sedan that he had as a college student. Like, I didn't even have the minivan that all my friends had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we're trying to figure out how to leap into a higher level of life and freedom. Like, ultimately, that's what we were really pursuing and wanting. And yet I'm like wearing the same jeans I'd worn through 2 pregnancies and can't afford to shop at the malls. I'm shopping at the thrift stores, and we're really not even making very much money through my husband's job. So my reality does not reflect this, oh, we're going to make it big someday and we're going to live our dream and we're going to have freedom. Nothing in my reality reflected that.
Yeah.
But I'm making these things, and I'm at this boutique. My friend had been telling me about it. So I go to this boutique, and as soon as I walked in, I really felt like I didn't deserve to be there. There were these gorgeous baby clothes and incredible baby shoes and really expensive strollers and carriers. And I was just like, oh, wow, you don't deserve to be in here, because I
Wow.
didn't fit in. But I wanted to see, I was really curious. And so I'm pushing my $9 stroller I got on clearance at Target. I'm wearing the same clothes I'd been wearing for 5+ years that had been through 2 pregnancies. And I have my kids with me. And I have a toddler in the stroller. And then I have my baby in a carrier that I had made. And he was wearing a hat that I had made, the carrier, and he was wearing some really unique shoes that I had also made.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, my skin is crawling. I just feel so uncomfortable in there because I know I don't fit in. I know I'm standing out in a really bad way. And this woman kind of sneaks up on me and she says, "Where'd you get all this stuff?" And I get really defensive. And I'm like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And
Because you were embarrassed by it?
because I was embarrassed. Yeah.
Wow.
And she starts pointing to the baby carrier, the blanket, the hat, the shoes. It was everything that I had made on this 1962 Bernina. And I
Wow.
was shocked. And I said, "Oh, and I'm embarrassed, right? Because I made this on a really old sewing machine that I confiscated from my mom. And I said, oh, do you like these? I made them. She was like them. I love them. I go to all the trade shows. This is hot. I want you to make it for me.
Wow.
And this is just not what she's saying doesn't match up with what I'm saying in my head. Like, not at all. I'm like, what are you talking about, lady? All this stuff in this. Turns out she's the boutique owner. And so I am like, I'm backpedaling because she just asked me to make it all for her. And I'm thinking on the sewing machine, and I barely had time to make all of this for my kids. And what am I going to? So I have all of these excuses in my head, and some of them are starting to spill out. And she stops me, Paul. And this is a moment that just really transformed my life. And she said, look, I understand that you have your hands full right now, but in just a couple of years, these kids are going to grow up and they'll be in school full time. And you will look back and you will wish that you had done something with your gifts and talents.
Wow.
She spoke a language that really spoke to me. You mentioned that you're Christian. I'm Christian too. And like the scriptures very specifically call out our talents.
Yeah.
And I knew I was talented. I didn't know how to apply my talents necessarily. And so when she said that, suddenly it lined up with what I knew God wanted for me.
Wow.
Which was putting my talents into the world and not burying them. And that's essentially what she was saying. Like, if you don't do something with this, you're burying your talents.
Yeah.
So I go home.
What a gift. What a gift that was.
Such a gift. Yeah. So I go home and I'm still not convinced, but I'm like, there's something to what she's saying. And my husband comes home, and I was always seeking, reassurance from him because he's an incredible designer too.
Yeah.
And he did see these things in me, by the way, but I just dismissed it. So at dinner that night, he's like, hey, how was today? I'm like, well, we went to that boutique that Karen was telling me about, and she was right. It's really nice. And, I had this really weird moment with the owner. She said the craziest thing to me, and I'm framing it and like, isn't she crazy? And I tell him what she said to me, and he puts his fork and knife down. He looks up at me and he was like, Katie, she's right.
Wow. Wow.
It makes me emotional.
Yeah.
And he was like, I know you don't have time to make all these things on your sewing machine, but that's not what you would do. And I was like, it's not? No, we would go find somebody who would make these for you. And I have all these excuses. I'm like, well, we're living on food storage. Like, how are we going to afford that? And I had all of these excuses and questions, and they started to come out, and he was like, we'll just figure it out. Go tell her yes and ask her how many she wants. And that's how my business started.
Wow. Wow. When it comes to, creatives, I think creatives often wrestle with the need for validation for what they're creating in the world,
Why do you think we're creating stuff?
Right. And until the right person validates something, we feel that it's not worthy of attention. We feel that it's just something I did. It's just something I created, out of necessity, out of boredom, out of desire, out of passion. But, the right person validating it just makes such a big difference. And through your husband saying, yes, I agree with her. And this gift, have you talked to that lady since? I mean, was that just such a random thing that you haven't seen her since?
It's been a very long time since I've seen her, but she is responsible for pretty much my life from that point on.
Isn't that incredible? I mean, it's these moments that change. And I've had those as a creative myself of these moments where somebody validated something that you felt unworthy of receiving, and it changed everything. I had it happen for me in grade school. I had we went to a state fair, and there was a Ferris wheel there, and it was amazing. And, we went back to school, and the principal, and I can't remember the whole story. Maybe I was disruptive in class or something. I don't remember what happened, but all I remember was the principal asked me to come to her office and draw my favorite thing from the fair. And, I had felt, I doodled, I drew pictures, nobody cares, it doesn't matter. But she asked me to come and draw the Ferris wheel outside her office. And I thought, she values my creativity. Wow. Like, that for me was such an important moment that she didn't realize the value of it. And so this lady at the store just had this moment with you that literally changed the direction of your life by just encouraging and validating what you were creating. And I think there is other people that need that as well. And so, if you're in a place where you can encourage a creative, certainly do that, because you don't know how much of an impact it could literally make on someone's life. And so that, started this journey for you. And at what point, like beyond that, did Pudge come about?
I want to point one last thing out with this woman. There was this insistence in her voice. And and when she used that word regret, it really hit me. And I think part of what she was sharing with me in that moment wasn't just a reassurance in my talents, is she was sharing her own personal regret in life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She never shared that with me, but man, I felt it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is when I first started my company. And for 2 years, I started building that company. And I started out with a name called Zoo. And we were about a year into that. And I was in about 20 stores as Zoo Modern, ZU. And my husband is a very big thinker, yin and yang. I'm just like looking at what's right in front of me. And he's like, well, what's 10 years down the road?
Yeah.
And so even though I was only in 20 stores, he started to look globally. He saw that brand potentially had a trademark issue in France. And he was like, we need to change the name. And I was like, what? And at that point, it was really cool because we had started on a small scale. I started with this name. And before we'd really made it big, I had a chance to really think about the name and be intentional about it. So I started looking at names and what does it mean? And this is when I came up with the name Pudge. We spell it P-U-J. Yeah. And at that time, this was like 2009, 2010. If you Googled Pudge, well, my thing was like the third thing on the front page of Google. So it was a really smart name. And that was part of the strategy. Plus, Pudge, it's very focused on your baby, your pudgy baby. And internationally, it became this really fun and cute and clever name. We own pudge.com. So it was a chance for us to really own that name. And with that name, I took it to a trade show in 2009. And I didn't really have, like, all the revenue I was making, it was just going right back into the business. We were living on like $3,000 a month, Paul. It's like a family of 4 plus 1 on the way. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. And so I take it to this trade show in New York, and I was in the booth of a sales rep. So she was representing other companies that would attract the right buyers. And I had like a little small corner. And so I fly to New York. I'm sleeping on the couch of a friend. Like, I don't even know these girls. I seriously got in at 1 a.m. and they showed me how to they emailed me or texted me. I can't remember. And I hadn't even seen any of them. And I'm at the Javits Center. I'm at this trade show. And again, like, I feel so small, so insignificant, like a nobody. I'm surrounded by brands that I personally really admire in this booth. And I'm feeling things like, you don't deserve to be here. And, everyone can tell you built this display in your garage. And like, I'd bought clothes at Forever 21, and I'm like, is everyone going to tell that I don't know that I'm not a real designer? Yeah. And, all the while, my husband's home with 2 kids. I'm pregnant with our third, by the way. And everything is on the line at this point, Paul. Like, we're out of money. We've gone through our savings. This has to work. And what we've done is, up until then, we were selling cut and sew products. But we knew that in order for us to kind of leapfrog to the next level and like really establish ourselves, it had to be a game changer product. And we had designed this infant bathtub. And, we had been kind of locally sourcing it, and they were doing such a botched job on manufacturing the product. It was not great. Quality wasn't there. They were so slow. Plus it was expensive. And it was like, okay, we need lots of purchase orders so that we can go to Asia and we can like really start up this engine. So we go to New York, everything's on the line, but nobody knows me. Nobody knows the product. And I'm just learning the industry. And I'm talking to these store buyers, Paul, and they're asking me questions like, what are your lead times? What's your wholesale price? What's your retail price? What does the retail package look like? What's your case pack minimums? And I am so out of my league. I
Wow.
got there on fumes, and I just like, I'm showing them a prototype that I made on my kitchen table, which is a hand-me-down from my grandfather, and using
Wow.
the tools that I bought at a garage sale. Like, they didn't know any of that, right?
They had no idea.
But they're taking me seriously, and they're asking all of these questions, and I'm doing my best to field all of their questions. But at the end of the day, I'm saying things like, well, let me write those questions down and I'll have my team email you. Well, guess what? I'm the team. So I'm having the conversations, and at the end of the trade show, I had multiple products, but like the one that was going to be the game changer was the Pudge Tub. So I'm looking through all the orders because I want to know, how many orders did we get for the Pudge Tub? And as I leaf through all of the orders, the number was 0.
Oh, wow.
0 orders on a product that we were betting the farm on. 0 orders on this product that was going to be our game changer. We were out of money. We were out of runway, and this had to work. Yeah. And so I leave that show terrified. I don't know what we're going to do. What am I even going to say to my husband?
Yeah.
So even just to get home, I remember feeling like, well, I need to bring something home to the kids, and I couldn't afford anything. And I stopped at like a snack cart, and I ordered 2 giant M&M cookies, and she said it was like $6.50, and I reached into my pocket. I only had $3.
Wow.
And I was like, I'll take 1. It was just devastating, right? So like that's the level of low that we were at. So I get home, and the kids are excited to see me. My husband's excited. I had been texting him the whole time, like, hey, I'm talking to this buyer and I'm talking to this buyer. So he's expecting me to come home and tell him how many orders we've had. And we can't even talk in the house. He pulls me into the garage. It's cold. We're surrounded by all of the prototyping, the dust. Honestly, now, as I looked at it in that moment, it was kind of the shame and the embarrassment and all the evidence of my failure. Yeah. And he starts asking me the questions. And I break down and I tell him, I'm like, nobody bought it. We failed. They don't want it. And he pauses for a minute. My husband's very intellectual. He's actually super bright. And he sits, and he, by the way, in a way, he'd had this kind of expert experience because he was kind of the go-to designer as an student intern for OGO. And he'd spent a lot of one-on-one time with the CEO of OGO. And so he'd actually learned a lot about retail and product and distribution from that experience. Yeah. And so it wasn't like I was just talking to my husband. I was actually talking to an expert in the industry. We're having this conversation. I tell him how it failed. And he said, Katie, it didn't fail. They didn't say no. I was like, yes, they did. They all said no. Can't you get this through your thick brain? He said, okay, they may have said those words, but they were asking you questions. They were engaging with you. They wanted to know more. So all we have to do is answer those questions and they'll all buy. Answer those questions and we'll be shipping this product all around the world. And Paul, in that moment, I was so tired and exhausted. I was tired of grinding wheat. And I was like, all my friends were leveling up their houses, leveling up their cars. And we were still living off this meager salary that my husband was getting. He wasn't seeking promotions because we were spending our time on this thing. Yeah. And to me, it was just like, this is the end of the road. Like there's nowhere to go from here. But when he said that, my body was on fire. And similar to that moment with the store buyer who helped me feel the regret of the future, in that moment, everything in me wanted to give up. I was tired, but I looked forward and I knew that if I gave up, the Katie of the future would really regret it. And she would wish that she could come back and keep going. And I couldn't live with that. And so even though everything in my reality says you failed miserably, stop it right now. Everybody else's life is proof that the other system works. I just couldn't live with that regret. And so I agreed with him. And I was like, we're going to figure this out and we're going to take it back. And a year later, Paul, we took it back. Everybody who came into the booth placed an order. Everybody.
Wow. And so
it changed my life. We went from being nobodies, a brand nobody had ever heard of us, in 0 stores, to literally within 12 months being in 2,000 stores in the US with distribution in 26 different countries, celebrities being caught by paparazzi with my product under their arms. In that year, we were featured in the Ellen Show, the Rachel Ray Show, and the Today Show. We were named Product of the Year by Pregnancy and Newborn Magazine. And so like, I go back to that moment a lot, because what if I'd given up?
Yeah.
What if I believed the doubts in my head? Because man, they were strong, and there was a lot of proof and evidence that I was still a nobody.
Yeah. And it's amazing how just that word of encouragement from your husband and remembering back to that store owner were enough to push you to keep going, so what changed within that year? You said, you went to the next show. What changed for you guys within that time frame?
Everything that those store buyers were asking me, all their questions, the answer to those questions were what would move me from being a person who has a prototype to a viable company that they can then rely to supply their store shelves. The retail game is very different than just direct to consumer, right? The retail game is they need to know price per square inch, how much money they're going to make on your product. And they need to know that you can ship and that you can ship fast and that their store shelf is never going to be empty. And what they saw in the New York show was a prototype. And they did really like it. But it wasn't a viable product that had all of the systems and processes in place to ensure that they would be supplied. Yeah. So that was the difference.
Yeah. And so they needed that certainty that if I create a relationship with this person, they're not going to let me down.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I obviously now didn't have that certainty at the time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so now you're a year later, it's blowing up. Celebrities are carrying your stuff. You're blown up, but now you're facing a new issue, and I think that new issue is kind of where you're at now with what you do, is the balance of family and business and all that you're doing. And so what are some of the challenges that arose from that also moved you into doing what you're doing now with helping executives balance all of that and make sure it's healthy?
As my business started to explode, it was like a rocket ship. And you're right, it was really exciting. But what people didn't see is it was actually tearing me up inside because I was being an impatient mother. There was a lot of tension in my marriage. I struggled to be present with anybody. It was hard to sleep at night. I always chronically felt behind. And, the number one priority was always the business, which meant my health, my marriage, my spiritual, like everything else was second fiddle. Is that the right saying?
Right. Second place. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's frequently under the belief that, there's some magical place that if I get my business to that magical place, then I'll have time for all of these other things. And in my mind, that was $1 million. Well, we got to $1 million, and my life was more stressful and chaotic and dynamic than it had ever been. Like the stress was magnified at $1 million.
Yeah.
And that was a terrifying moment for me because I was like, oh no, what's the solution? So there was this moment where I'm in a battle, not just internally, but with God. And I'm sweeping the kitchen and I'm just like, look, I know that you gave me a lot of gifts and talents. That's awesome and cool. I've started to build this company from that. I felt really inspired to do this thing, but this is not sustainable. And it's all going to come crashing down. And to reference the regret, I'm going to regret that more than anything in my life, right? If my marriage doesn't survive this, I love this man. Yeah. And there's a lot of moments where I'm frustrated with him, and it's because of the business. Yeah. Same with my kids. Like I love these kids, but I just am so impatient with them. By 10 a.m., they get mean mommy at the helm. Yeah. And that's not fair. That's not okay. And, spiritually, I did not feel grounded, and I was not getting enough sleep. And so I walked that forward. And I was like, oh, wow, this is not sustainable. Yeah. But something that was driving me the whole time, Paul, was those gifts and talents. I was so curious how far I could take these things. Yeah. And so I was in this double bind because setting the business down felt wrong. I knew that the business was stretching me in ways that the other areas of my life just weren't going to. And it was developing parts of me that the other parts of my life just weren't. It's not to say that not having a business is wrong or vice versa. It just, for me specifically, I could tell that there were parts of me that were being developed within the business that weren't happening in the other areas of my life. But I just, it all seemed so incompatible.
Yeah.
So I'm in a wrestle with myself and with God. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I don't see how this all works. I just see a lot of destruction personally if I keep moving forward like this. And I had been reading lots of autobiographies. Thank you. I'd been reading, like literally, I was at the library constantly checking out autobiographies from other incredible brands and reading the stories of those entrepreneurs. And there was a lot of evidence to support my fears. And, you know, stories in Entrepreneur and Inc. magazine, same thing. And I was just like, wow, I don't want that life.
Yeah.
And so I don't have proof that it works. And it's too risky to keep going. So I'm in this battle and I'm telling God, and I'm just telling him how it's going to be. Like, it's too risky. I can't handle that. And he speaks to me in that moment, and it's, Katie, you're looking for the proof that this all works out, but you don't need proof because you're a designer. So while you might not see the family, the brand, the person who's capable of navigating all of these things, you don't need that, because you can go create the woman who's capable of this multidimensional life.
Wow.
And that was the moment, Paul, that I realized what I had done so well in my brand was kind of reverse engineering for an outcome through design and design thinking. It was time to turn that design process on myself and literally create myself.
Yeah. Well,
and that became enough for me to have the faith to keep going. I was like, okay, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, hustle culture is, you know, people talk about it and we watch videos on it, and sometimes they drive us, they inspire us to keep going, to keep moving. But also there's also the unhealthy side of that, of hustle culture, because, you know, one thing that I've always said is that something pays, like something is paying for that. And, you know, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your health, whether it's your spirituality, whether it's your emotions, you know, something's going to pay for hustle culture if you don't have the right things in place. And, you know, the other thing you had talked about is, you know, now you were a millionaire, you know, you went from grinding your own wheat to make, you know, food, to now you're a millionaire. And, you know, most people think, well, if I get to this level, all my problems will be gone. You know, all the problems that I had before will go away, and I'll be living in this, you know, beautiful state. And it's like, I think somebody once said, you know, new levels, new devils, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you hit this new place, and suddenly you've got $1 million problems. You've got, you know, bigger problems and different problems. And so, you know, you work with executives to balance all of that. You work with people to balance all of that. What are some of the things that, you know, when it comes to hitting those places, to create that balance, to create that health, to not drain people? What are some of the tools that you start bringing out of your tool set, out of that wood shop that you once worked in, you know, what are some of those tools that you bring out to start helping people with those areas?
You know, you referenced hustle culture, and it was so glorified at the time. This was like 2008, 2009, 2010. And so I started doing things my own way, utilizing my own design thinking and then the subsequent systems and processes. And we'll talk about that in a second. But what's interesting is I hid it from people because it didn't fit the hustle culture narrative. And so I was embarrassed because I thought I was doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So what started to happen, though, is inside Pudge, I would continue to go to events, trade shows or press events, and people would meet me in person, and they followed me on Instagram, and they saw the huge success of my brand. And then they would meet me in person, and they're like, whoa, you're like really grounded and happy and don't seem stressed. And so as a result, I started taking on, I didn't even know what I was doing at the time, but I started taking on coaching clients on the side inside of that company because people were like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I mean, I can't say it out loud here because it's not okay. And so we would have these phone calls and I would tell them the secrets to what I was doing. And it was very anti to the hustle culture narrative.
Yeah.
And I was embarrassed by it. And in fact, there were even things that I was hiding from my husband, which might sound weird, but I was like, if he knew this, like he would be like, you're not pushing hard enough. And so
wow.
I hid a lot of these things. And when we sold our company, I moved into coaching full time. And I was terrified, Paul, because now I had to be more upfront about what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it terrified me. And I was waking up in sweats, like sweaty. That's not like in cold sweats. I don't know how to describe it, but I was just like, I was afraid to face the day. And it was kind of the first time in my life I was afraid to face the day because I was afraid I was going to be exposed and that everyone was going to say, you're doing it wrong. That's not true. It needs to be like this. You need to push harder. And so I actually started taking clients on and they would come to me with all this toxic hustle culture.
Yeah.
And I would be like, well, that is one way to build your business, but here's how I've done it. And I would show them my systems and my processes, and it would make their brain explode. And it actually scared them because it was so counter to the narrative. And they would push back. And I would say, listen, you don't have to trust me. Don't trust me. Just go try it. That's all you have to do. Just go try it. Test it out. See if it works for you. Test drive it. And so they would. And we would meet every week. And so they would test it out during the week. And they would come back gobsmacked with their jaw dropped. And they're like, Katie, I know you already know this, but it worked. And it wasn't nearly as hard. And they're coming to me. And it was fun. It was exciting. I had time on the weekend to hang out with my friends. And they were just like, it's so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And I would tell them that when I would teach it to them. I'm like, listen, your brain's not going to like this. And it's going to tell you it doesn't work because it's so counter to your current operating system.
Yeah.
But what I was teaching them, Paul, was a radically new operating system that was rooted in something totally different. And you alluded to this as you read my bio. It was rooted in power.
Yeah.
This hustle culture, it's actually rooted in scarcity. It's rooted in fear. And when we take action from that place, we're frantic. And we actually create frantic outcomes and results. Sometimes we're working 100 and 120 hours a week that we can kind of outpace everybody in a sense. But at some point, you can't work then more than 120 hours a week. And you actually have to play the game very differently. This is what I teach entrepreneurs. And again, some people come, they like hear my message and they're like, wow, she's doing something that really works because they see client after client after client have huge successes. And then they'll come to me and they come to me with their very logical mind, by the way. And I'm like, look, what I can teach you is really hard work, but it's not the hard work you're used to. Like, are you open to that? And some people just are not. Yeah. And so some people will walk away and they continue to use the same operating system they've used their whole life. And that's why they're stuck.
Right. And for a lot of people, they feel that if they're not, even if they're, they've got to keep going, they've got to keep moving, they've got to keep doing, they've got to keep, and if they're not doing it like that, they're not working hard enough, and it's, it's like painting graffiti on a moving train. Like they're super productive, but they're not creating anything. They're constantly hitting.
Great analogy.
They're constantly hitting roadblocks. But they're busy. They're busy. They're creating.
They're very busy.
Yeah.
And the busy makes us feel productive. It makes us feel significant.
Right.
And I had to confront that in my own life because I experienced that.
Yeah. And so when somebody does come to you with that mindset, with that working operating system that is telling them keep doing the graffiti on the moving train, keep going, keep moving. What is it, when you bring out your toolbox, what is the first chisel that you bring out? I have some
visuals. I don't know. Yeah. I'll describe these because I know a lot of people are probably listening to us, but I'm a very visual person as a designer. And sometimes if I can break it down in a way that you can see it, you actually make new connections.
Yeah, so this will be both visual and audio.
Yeah. So when I had that huge target of $1 million, right? If we can just get to $1 million, then things will calm down and things will start to fall into place. And that's kind of the first destination that I'm trying to get to. And what happens is we get to that destination and we're like, okay, yeah, I am here. This is that place that I said that I wanted, but this is missing and I don't like that. And I'm working too much and I'm angry with my kids, right? That was the place I find myself. So we have this island that we're trying to get to. We get to that destination only to realize that we actually want to be over there, that other island. But holy cow, I just used all my time and resources to get to this island and I feel stranded. I feel stuck. Like, now that I'm at that first destination, now I see where I really want to go is that place over there. And so it's terrifying because we get there on fumes and we're burned out just to get there. And so what we do is we stand at that place and we think, okay, I guess it took everything in me to get here. So somehow magically, I'm supposed to work harder and be even more disciplined to get to that place that now I see I really want to get to. And see, that's the problem, Paul. They're taking what they've done in the past, AKA their current operating system, and they're moving it forward. But the reality is you'll never get to that actual dream place using the same things you've done in the past. Your old operating system.
Yeah.
And so what we feel in that moment is we feel so spread thin and overwhelmed. And it looks like this. Now this is someone who's holding a bow and an arrow, right? We're aiming at different targets. There are so many targets and they are all over the place. And this is what we feel like inside. And not only does this targets all over the place represent our business, because you have, I mean, my business was 5 businesses in one. We were a manufacturer, a wholesaler, a retailer, a design house, a distributor, right? And then under each of those businesses, there's all these complexities, right? You have to work with your bookkeeper, you have a tech guy, you have a website, you're checking inventory. It's just crazy, the level of complexity that we were experiencing in our life. And this is what CEOs and entrepreneurs feel like on the inside. And this is why it's so hard for them to be present at any moment, because when he's staring at this target, well, wait a minute, what's happening over here? So even though he's at his business meeting with his team, he's also thinking, well, I have to talk with my investors. And what am I going to say to them? Because I have a meeting after this one with my investors. And so he's never present. He's always being pulled in so many different directions. And this is what we feel like.
Yeah.
And in that moment, when I realized I needed to play the game differently, it actually at the time was a feeling, and it took me a while to take that feeling and actually draw it out. And these are the drawings that subsequently came from that feeling. Because what I started to feel was this. And I was like, oh, I can play that game. Now this is me, the entrepreneur with my bow and arrow. And suddenly all of my targets actually have adjusted and they are now fully aligned.
Yeah.
They're all pointing in the same direction. So rather than constantly feeling overwhelmed, spread thin, when I'm at home, I should be at work. When I'm at work, I should be home. All of a sudden, when I am at home, it's actually improving my business and it's supporting my business. And when I'm traveling and I'm at a trade show, it's actually improving my family culture. And it seems so counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
So these are the visuals. And when I show this to people, they're like, oh my gosh, Katie, I want that. I need that. How do I do that in my life? Like when they see the aligned targets, they immediately start to feel the relief in their body. The stress level starts to go down.
Yeah.
And they're like, how do we actually do that? And the answer is you need the new operating system. That's how you do it. And this is what I teach people, Paul. I teach them a new operating system. And it also is complete with a new strategy, which I call a compass sketch. And it supports this new operating system. So
when it comes to, most people don't want a new operating system. They just want an upgrade to the old one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so sometimes it's a radical new way of looking at things, a new frame for what you're doing, a new way of perceiving the things in front of you. So when it comes to, what are some of those other targets that are kind of, and the visual was, somebody standing with a bow and arrow with a range, like a cloud of targets around them. What are some of the other clouds that can sometimes distract people or overwhelm people when it comes to being an entrepreneur?
the interesting thing is, I would say a large majority, maybe even like 85% of what's holding people back is in between their left and right ear. It's in your head.
Yeah.
And it's, something happens in life, okay? And we immediately, without realizing it, we create a story out of it. We attach all sorts of meaning behind it. We create judgment about ourselves and others. And that all of that so quickly happens with the incident that we can't see any other way of framing that situation.
Yeah.
And so we move through life in a reactionary state. React. And as entrepreneurs, when you have a multidimensional life and you have all of this complexity, you have to react or stuff's like not going to move forward and you're dropping the ball. So the opportunity is to step out of that reaction mode and really design your life.
Yeah.
And that's what we do here. So what are some of the other things? It just depends on what's going on in your life. Like, I had a client who, when I met him, he had so much complexity. Okay, this is what it looked like for him, Paul. He's such an extreme example, and it's so good because I couldn't even believe it when I uncovered it all. It took me 45 minutes to uncover this, but after we were talking for 45 minutes, I said, let me just make sure I'm getting this correct. You have a business with a team of 16, but you're actively losing your best employees, including a former employee who's trying to sue you for $1 million. You're working 120 hours a week, while your business partner, who's raking it in, by the way, is working 0. And you can't separate from that business partner who's taking advantage of you, by the way. You can't separate him from him because, and it took so much digging to get this out of him. Surprise, he's a family member. And
wow.
if you create any sort of friction in that relationship, it will send your mom into a mental health break, which has happened before, and she'll end up in the hospital and you'll be responsible for it. And when you come home at night, your wife wants to know why you're not being present with your 2 and 3-year-old. Did I get that correct? Is that what's going on in your life? And he paused and he said, Katie, nobody's strung it all together that way. But yeah, that's the reality.
Wow.
And here's the deal, Paul. People who are building a significant business, they're super smart. They're hard workers. They will literally work themselves to death because they have a very high tolerance for pain. And so they're not going to stop. They won't stop until life says you are forced to stop right now. And a lot of times it'll show up in their health. And this is what I'm committed to put a stop to, because these are brilliant men and women. We need them. We need them to lead, but lead from a place of power, not lead from a place of frantic energy. And they're pushing themselves to a point that is irreversible. And it's really terrifying and super sad. We need these people. They don't know how much we need them, by the way. And they don't know just how unique and brilliant their brain is. They actually kind of think that they're just a regular old Joe sometimes. And I have to help them see that, no, actually, you see the world really differently. And you need to understand that. And you need to own that. And we need you to own that. And that then, in turn, by owning that, it actually helps them understand how to better lead. And I teach them a lot of that. But they have to understand that they're different than other people.
Right.
They're a misfit.
They're a misfit.
Yeah.
And so, the other illustration of everything aligned, for those, this will be an audio podcast. It'll also be on YouTube. So they'll get to see the visual, but the visual was, somebody shooting a target with all the targets aligned. What does that journey look like for somebody to get to that? Like how does all that happen? You mentioned the operating system change over, but with the operating system, there's apps. What are some of the apps that need to be installed for that operating system to work?
I believe in the power of our inner desires. And that's actually where I start. I want to know on a really deep level, what do you want? And when I first ask somebody that question, they're super confused. Sometimes it can be really terrifying. Some people know, and they've never described it to anybody because most people can't handle it. And I get that a lot from clients. They're like, oh, you have no idea what a relief it is to be able to spill out all of my vision and my ideas and my creativity, and you can handle it. So they're not able to share it with most people. And so maybe they haven't fully externalized it. They can see it in their mind, but they're struggling to describe it. So it's what do you want? Why does that matter to you? And then the third one, which is super important, is who are you? And that one's really terrifying too.
Yeah.
They're not easy questions to answer. And you actually need a lot of help because without realizing it, we cover those things, we hide them. And so a lot of times people will be blind to certain components of that.
Yeah.
And they don't even realize they're blind to it. But I can see past that.
Right.
So what you need to do is those need to be lined up. That's the core of it. If you can line those three things up, and it effectively looks like this: what you're thinking and wanting, which is your heart, and doing and choosing, like all of that is pointed in the same direction. And when your energy, when your thoughts, when your actions, when your desires are literally all pointed at the same target, nobody can stop you.
Man, that's amazing. I think just those 3 points alone are a head smack for somebody that, and the thing is, they seem like they're so easy. And you said they seem like such easy questions, but if you get really down to it, they're probably going to take you a while to answer, and you're probably going to get emotional about it, and you're probably going to have some surface things that you put down, because they are such core questions to who we are and what we're about. You know, understanding like who you are. You know, one thing that I've said is, you know, identity brings clarity, and once you know who you are, you know what to do. And answering that question on a deep level is a tough question. Like you might come up with, 10 things, 20 things, 30 things, 40 things, 50 things at first, until you actually get down to the core of who you are.
Well, to your point, it is really difficult. I have a client who has a very significant business, and he had his first level of buyout, and he'll be $1 billion business in about 18 months. And I've been asking him specifically the "what do you want" question for 5 months. He's just now starting to be able to answer that, because there was so much noise covering it up. And I'm really good at parsing through the noise. And even the question, who are you? I haven't even asked him that question, because that one's terrifying and it's really difficult. But through our sessions, I find the evidence of that. And so we've started to put that puzzle together too, through like little clues that he drops and he leaves, and we're putting it together. And like, I referenced parabolic growth. It's interesting because he's kind of been like this, but like it's like bonk. It's just going straight up right now. And I had this experience where I was taught by a triathlon coach how to swim like a dolphin. And I'd been swimming my whole life, and I was a pretty fast swimmer. He teaches me how to swim like a dolphin. It's a totally new technique, right? But I'm a swimmer. It's not going to take very long. For 3 weeks, Paul, I felt like I was drowning. But I stayed with the system. I stayed with the process. I trusted the expert. I kept doing it week after week after week. And I wasn't getting better. In fact, I was getting slower. But 3 weeks in, and lap 18, something happened, and all of those muscles that I was developing, that I was consciously having to think about, it literally all snapped into place. And I was a machine in the water, and nobody could stop me. And that's what's happening for my client right now. He's having to learn a new operating system. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. It even slows you down a little bit in the beginning. But if you want to go up hard and fast, you have to be willing to go down first.
Right.
And that's where he's at.
Right. Well, and that is the thing is we can get so caught up in the hustle, the grind, the doing, that we don't take time to do the reflecting and to answer those deep questions. And I think, and we think they will slow us down, but actually what they are is they're going to take us to the next level. It's kind of like, using an old phone with an old operating system. You just grind through it. You just keep going. Because you can't slow down. But then you realize, well, man, if I upgrade my phone and get a better operating system, that I'll actually be able to do things faster. While I might pause for a little bit, So I do encourage those that are listening and watching this is, take some time to pause, like take some time to reflect on those deep questions. And you'll find that, while it might slow you down as the startup sound goes bing and everything's restarting, that you'll actually find that it's way better on the other side of that when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it literally, sometimes it is gradual, but so many of my clients have this like switch moment where we just flipped the switch, and it's really exciting. And that's where it's just game on, because you're now a new machine.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's those Headsmack moments where just everything it happens,
all comes together.
Like, it all comes together. It all converges, and just like we had talked about earlier, all your experience, the woodworking, the design, it kind of had a convergence point to become who you are. And then other things happen to kind of form the next version of you. But it's taken all of those and reflecting and saying, who am I? What am I about? What do I want? And taking you to the next level. Katie, this has been amazing.
Oh, thanks.
Go ahead.
Unfortunately, until the road or path that we're on becomes so painful you can't take it anymore, then we're not willing to change. Because what I've shared with you today is how to build your business from the inside out. And that is the secret to an unstoppable business. Nobody can destroy you.
Yeah.
Because you've built a real foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Thank you, Katie. Yeah. This has really been encouraging, amazing, great conversation. So many good things that you've shared that I really believe that for some people, it has been some great head smacks, some moments of clarity, some moments of, I need to pause. I'm kind of heading in the wrong direction. And I think even your story of the things that you went through and just feeling imposter syndrome, feeling unworthy, and just those words of encouragement to people. Maybe you're not the entrepreneur. Maybe you're listening to this and you're like, I'm not the entrepreneur, but I wanted to listen to the podcast. I found it interesting. Maybe you could be that encourager too. Like maybe your role in this story today is that you're that person that needs to encourage somebody that mom with kids that is struggling, that doesn't, you don't know that she just needs that word of encouragement, or that young person that feels like they're unworthy of any kind of success or feeling good about what they're doing. And you're just that encourager that could literally change the destiny of that person by simply being that encourager and giving them a good word and giving them a kind word and saying, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. There is light on the other side of this. There is hope on the other side of this. And so thank you, Katie, so much for sharing your story as well. And then just your abilities to help entrepreneurs with coaching and take them to the next level and get them in the right mindset. I do encourage anybody, if you're needing a coach, do look into Katie and what she offers and look into getting a coach. I think it'll really transform your life. Katie, for people that have loved what you've had to say and want to be a part of your world, how do they connect with you?
You mentioned my coaching. I'm known for one-on-one coaching. I also have group programs, and I even have courses and programs that you can DIY, which is awesome. So the best way to get in contact with me is katie.live on Instagram. I also have my own podcast called What's Working Now, and you can go listen there. The first 8 episodes are my entrepreneurial story. And reach out, send me a DM. I love hearing from listeners. I genuinely mean that. So, and thank you, Paul. This has been an incredible conversation. Really incredible. I really appreciated your perspective and the questions that you asked. And it's been amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie. And everybody have a great day and take some of these, put them into action. Your life can literally change and your destiny can change if you just take one idea and take bold action on it. And so if you've gotten something from this today, I do encourage you to take bold action on it and just see what happens. And thank you once again, Katie, and have a great day. Take care.
Thanks.